Okay, this is just kind of a quick little review of cycling throughout abiotic and biotic factors in nature. So I'm going to go back actually to here and just sort of remind you of some of the cycles that you probably do know about already, really simple ones that won't take you a long time to review. The water cycle. So this cycle explains how water is transmitted throughout the ecosystem. So if we start in a body of water, we have evaporation as the water rises. As it starts to cool in the upper atmosphere, we get condensation. Usually it will then kind of shift inland as the low pressure system drives it over the land, and then we would get precipitation in the form of rain, sleet, or snow, occasionally fog. From there we can get surface runoff, which would be trickle-down weathering erosion. It will usually then do what's called percolation, like coffee. To percolate means to drip down through the rocks. So that is not actually listed here, but percolation would be how the surface water gets into the groundwater, or the groundwater table, as it's called. And then we also get redistribution of precipitation into lakes and rivers again. And then that would go back down into the groundwater table, or from lakes and rivers, and eventually make its way back out to the ocean. There is one other thing that's not pictured here, which is called transpiration. Transpiration is evaporation directly from a plant. So plants have little holes in the bottom of their leaves, and they actually do open up in warmer weather, and water can escape directly from the plant into the atmosphere. So transpiration and evaporation, sort of same thing from different places, and the other word that's not pictured here, percolation, down through the ground. So you probably are familiar with that cycle. You're also probably familiar with the carbon cycle. So carbon dioxide exists in the atmosphere. Through photosynthesis, it gets absorbed into plants. Plants can do two things. They can decay and become fossils over time, or they could be eaten by an organism, and the organism can then do two things. The organism can respire or breathe, exhaling carbon dioxide back out into the atmosphere, or the organism could die and also become fossils. And we talked about this in class. That's where we get our fossil fuels. Another thing you may not know is that plants breathe too. So plants can respire as well, adding CO2 back out into the atmosphere. From fossil fuels, humans burn gasoline, tar, etc. And when we burn coal and fossil fuels, we release more CO2 back out into the atmosphere again. There's also carbon uptake in oceans. So calcium carbonate uses a lot of carbon, and it's one of the things that clams, crabs, lobsters, coral make their shells out of. So we lose a lot of carbon dioxide into the ocean. Which is part of the reason it's important for us to keep our oceans healthy. Since we're burning so much CO2, we're throwing off the entire carbon cycle, which is part of the biggest attributes and additions to the climate change that we're experiencing currently. In addition to that, we've over-polluted our oceans, so the oceans are having a hard time uptaking the carbon that we're burning in excess. So we're making too much carbon for the trees to assimilate via photosynthesis. We're also deforesting huge acreage of trees, so we're losing a lot of our trees that would help us, and then we're also polluting the ocean, so we're losing a lot of the coral reefs that would help us too. So humans are kind of responsible for throwing this cycle off, but this is how it should work in a normal, healthy atmosphere. So there's the simple carbon cycle. Two cycles that you probably are not familiar with. One is the phosphorus cycle. So the reason we go over phosphorus, and then we're going to do nitrogen as well, is because these are two of the 6 bioelements. So we have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. So the phosphorus cycle, pictured right here, is one of the ways that we get phosphorus into our system for upkeeping our DNA. So phosphorus is used in RNA and DNA. So basically phosphorus is only existent in rocks. So the rock needs to be uplifted through plate tectonics. Then it would need to be weathered or eroded. the phosphorus would then become runoff. From the runoff stage, plants can uptake the phosphorus, or it can be dissolved into ocean water. From that point, ocean plants and phytoplankton can uptake it, or terrestrial plants. And living organisms get the phosphorus they need from eating those plants. When we die, it would decompose back into the soil, eventually become part of the mineral rock layer, and over millions and millions and millions of years get uplifted again. So the phosphorus cycle takes an extremely long time. One of the problems that we're having currently is that humans have strip mined phosphorus to make things like fertilizer. And in order for that phosphorus that we have completely stripped from the environment to regenerate itself, it's going to take millions and millions and millions of years. So now we're coming up with synthetic phosphorus, but by dumping synthetic phosphorus into runoff from fertilizer, we're actually polluting oceans with too much phosphorus, and we're creating fish kills because of that. So just again, another human impact. One of our last units is human impact, so I'm kind of going into that a little bit here. Here's the nitrogen cycle. So nitrogen is part of our DNA. It's a huge component for building amino acids and proteins. Nitrogen is only put into a form that humans can utilize it by bacteria, lightning, or special plants called legumes. And there's some nitrifying algae. So nitrogen exists in the atmosphere always. If it gets struck by lightning, eaten by bacteria, eaten by algae, or taken up by a legume, then we can eat it. Organisms can eat it. As the organisms urinate and die and decay, that nitrogen is put back into the soil and taken up by denitrifying bacteria and put back in the atmosphere. The cycle continues. So that's a quick review of abiotic and biotic energy cycling. Thank you.